So welcome everyone. I'm Michael Dehaan, the financial wellness leader and co-founder of Quantum Leap Global. And I've got Amanda Cassar with me today. How are you, Amanda?
I'm mostly well, but if I'm a little bit croaky, please excuse my voice. I'm coming out the back of laryngitis, so almost healed.
And I know you got that from overseas, so
I did. I think the plane ride must have ruined me. So within 2 days of arriving, I was quiet. I think everyone thought it was the best version of me, actually. They didn't have to listen to me the whole time I was there.
And I was talking to Amanda initially. Amanda runs a podcast, Financial Secrets Revealed, which is interesting. So you host them, and we sort of connected a while ago in regard to me being a guest on that. But I was really interested in looking at your career, where you're at. So you're in the financial planning industry. You've been running your own business for over 21 years. Very much a sort of a male-dominated industry. We'll chat about that a bit further. And the business is Wealth Planning Partners. But what I saw there is, when I dug a bit deeper and I was talking to you, what I saw is that you're really a thought leader, sort of creating change. And why I asked you to come on this Women's Empowerment series, which is really around women using their voice and visibility, is that you're on the chair of the MDRT, which is a Premier Association of Financial Professionals. So I think that sort of creating change, leading change, and women having that strong voice, that's what really stood out for me. And we're both advocates of financial abuse. So
absolutely,
we've got a lot of similar purposes. But I thought we'd like to just sort of get to know you a bit before we sort of delve into your career and maybe even some stuff around that financial abuse.
Yeah, so a few years ago, like everybody, you want to write a book. So I wasn't quite sure whether it was going to be, a crazy romance or a business book, but obviously the business side one made a lot more sense. And that was called Financial Secrets Revealed. So that was an interview style book where I wanted to learn more about people's money stories and what their parents taught them about money and what sort of a legacy they wanted to leave for their children. And the overwhelming answer to, what did your parents teach you, was nothing. Yeah. So that sort of opened up the door for a lot of chats. And then when you ask them, well, what are you teaching your children about money? It causes people to stop and think, because, the lessons that we learn are things like, money doesn't grow on trees, or get a good job and go to university and you'll be okay. So are we still, perpetuating those stories, or are we coming up with different stories now about scarcity and abundance, and that money's a tool and, it can be used for good or evil? So what sort of stories, have we learnt or wish we'd known? So the podcast was born from the book. And one of the stories in the book was all about, excuse me, a lady who had suffered from severe financial abuse from her partner. And at that stage, I didn't really know a lot about it. My parents were together forever. My husband's parents are together. We've been married 28 years now. It just wasn't something that was on my radar at all. And I thought, as an advisor, how come I don't know more about this or haven't heard about it? So went exploring and found, that this is a pretty common thing. And in nearly every case of domestic violence that happens, financial abuse is part of it. There's always that question, well, if it was that bad, why didn't you leave? And the answer is usually the money. It's apart from, personal endangerment as well. It's very difficult when you've been, coercively controlled or don't have a career anymore, or you've been a primary caregiver, to walk away with nothing. So it just opened my eyes, I suppose, to a whole new space. And I just thought, as advisors, we're in this beautiful position where people share with us, things they don't tell anybody else. Yeah. And not all of us know how to look for the signs, or even if we see them, know what to do. And I still know advisors who go, that's out of my league, I'm not interested. It's sort of a bit dangerous and taboo, and I don't know how to touch it. So I sort of went on a bit of an adventure journey to say, how can we, help advisors understand, the options we've got to be able to help people. So I partnered with a girlfriend in the UK who I've just been to see, which was great. And she runs a company called Standards International, and helped me launch the Financial Abuse Specialist accreditation. So from hearing this one story to ending up with this global accreditation, it's been quite a long
Wow.
line of events that sort of leads to that. But it's amazing how, stories are powerful. They can change people's lives. So
No, and that's so true. And I think even if you look at that sort of societal conditioning, which generally sort of women have been brought up to be the carer, which is looking after everyone else. And I remember a story that a woman shared with me, that she was told by her father that all you could hope for is to marry a guy and then be looked after financially. So, and that's just one story. So you hear those sort of stories there around disempowerment, around dependency, and it's as I said, it's run down from families, but it's also the culture.
absolutely, and it's generational. The man was the plan. It was, you go to school if you want a career. You might be able to be a nurse or a teacher or get a secretarial role, but you're waiting for, the doctor or the lawyer or some of the hard worker to come and rescue you and provide. That was how life worked.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been successful in running your own business, as I said, for over 21 years. We talked about the financial planning industry being very sort of male dominated. Would you share some stories around like how you shine up in that industry? Because as I said before, you've certainly got that thought leadership style and creating change and looking at financial abuse and looking at, I suppose, offering that financial planning for all Australians. But sort of what are some stories around your success that women can take away and to be their true authentic selves?
I think it wasn't something. I didn't leave high school and go, that's it, I'm going to be a financial planner. And I don't think you'll find a financial planner who did. I started as a secretary to one of my dad's friends who was a life insurance agent. For many years, I did that role. Suddenly, life insurance agents became financial planners and secretaries became personal assistants. I don't know how that happened. But after some years and having my children and going back to work after mat leave, a few people said to me, like, why don't you do planning? And it was, oh no, I just want to keep things simple. And we're in a situation where my husband was doing manual labor and, mowing lawns and a bit of landscaping and not making a lot of money. And I was on a very minimum part-time wage with the children. And I think one day I sort of went, well, why don't I? When the lead advisor was away back then, I would write the business. There were no, legal requirements back then, for fact finds and statements of advice. So I knew I was capable, but there was that confidence completely lacking to do it. But eventually decided, look, what if I could make a little bit more commission to make things a bit better for us? Or what if I can put those things in place for somebody else to protect their family? So it was sort of born a little bit out of need and necessity and wanting to improve. And when I started doing my training, I became this Uber networker. I went to the opening of an envelope. I didn't understand, sitting down in these events that, I was the only woman at the table. I didn't even notice to start with. And I was listening to top down and bottom up and macro and micro and Sharp ratios and Jensen's. And I'm just sitting there absolutely clueless about what's happening, but absorbing at the same time and, thinking I'm the dumbest person in the room. And sometimes that's the best way to be, because you do become the sponge and you want to improve. And I think still the numbers are only around 15 to 18% of women in financial services, which is such a shame, because women have, I suppose, that a different take on it. We're looking at it from how can we protect our families? How can we make our own lives better? How do we improve our communities with what we do? So it's a fantastic career that I really believe more women should be involved in. And it's also quite flexible when you do have a family. So there's definitely opportunities. Look, in the early days, there were some fabulous men who mentored me and were more than happy to share their wisdom and that with me. But it's so lovely now that there are other women I can turn to who, have their own licenses, who have been advisors, even longer than me. So, it is lovely that there are those opportunities out there now.
Yeah, and what I picked up there is, I think, is even that mindset. So instead of I can't, you kept on saying, what if I can? What if I can do this? What if I can do that? And that to me is a growth mindset.
Well, it was very difficult to flick that switch. My father had been, grow up, keep your life simple, don't get too big for your boots, don't take on too much debt. You are just a wife and mother. And, the idea of his daughter becoming a businesswoman never occurred to him. He was more than happy for me to take on, a self-employed career as a music teacher or to, work in a store. It would never have occurred to him that I'd be this person now, or to me at that stage. So I think being brave enough to go, you know what, I'll give it a red hot crack and see where it goes.
And I think what you said before about, I think women in that financial services, because they do have that empathy, and there is more of a sort of a safety, and it'll bring people into that industry to seek more guidance, seek more advice, because they feel heard, they feel safe in coming into that environment. Where we got the masculine traits. I mean, everyone's got feminine and masculine traits, but the masculine traits, let's get returns, let's build wealth, which is all great. But you got to have that safety. You got to hold their hand and go, like, yes, you're going to be outside your comfort zone, but let's walk towards this, because building your life that you desire is pretty good. It's pretty important.
And it's, in some ways, it's quite an intimate relationship, because you don't talk to everybody about your finances. Yeah. So, and you do, over many years, some of my clients go back 20 years. So, you do become friends and go on this journey and hold their babies and watch them go to school and, all the rest of it. So that happens, and it's really lovely.
Yeah. Can I ask a question that a lot of the women I interview, business owners in particular, entrepreneurs, is that they can get judged a lot, even by other women. So, like, how can you run a business and work long hours potentially? Who's looking after the kids? Like, they just put you in that role and saying, are you a good mother? You can't do both, so to speak. Did you get any of that? Did you get any sort of that judgment?
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't just from other people, it was me. I use that expression. I used to should all over myself. I should be with my kids. I should be, doing these other things. And I can't remember what the trigger was, but one day I just went, I am wasting my time with all this guilt. When I'm with my clients, I thought I should be with my kids. And when I'm with my kids, I thought I should be with my clients or building my business or doing some study. And it was exhausting. Yeah. So I can't remember whether it was just constant learning that I went one day, you know what, why don't I just be present? When I'm with my clients, I'm with my clients. When I'm with my children, I'm 100% with my children. That was more than difficult when I had a home office. Try and close that door and take that hat off and, come in and be present. So I'm still a work in progress learning that, but I wish I'd known that a lot sooner, to leave the judgment and guilt at the door and do what's right for you. There's always someone who's not going to be pleased or impressed with how you're running your life. Yeah. It's your life to run. And
that's a great answer. And I appreciate that sort of honesty there, because generally you're your harshest critic.
Totally.
And then learning that and learning tools around that and being present. So you could spend 10 hours with your kids, but that is a quality, is it really connection? So that's great feedback, and working through those sort of beliefs, because again, if you work through it yourself, if you do the internal work, the external noise sort of quiets down.
Yeah, well, you're focused on what's important to you. So, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Sometimes, there'll be a little barb and you're like, wow, that still got to me. I wonder what I've got to deal with there or to have a think about. But for the most part, it's like, you know what, you do you, I'll do me.
So I'm going to ask a question around that, the financial planning industry. We talked about there's not a lot of women in that industry, and we talked about the value of what women can bring to the industry. So what sort of advice for a young woman maybe thinking about wanting to do her own business and go down that pathway, but is obviously scared or doesn't want to feel judged or doesn't have the support around her from family potentially? What are some things there that might support them in regard to their mindset or beliefs in themselves to give it a crack, so to speak?
I think there's within the associations now, so the Financial Planning Association, the Association of Financial Advisors, so the FPA and the AFA, both of them have dedicated women's networks within those associations now, where AFA have their Inspire group, where there's events run purely for women in financial services. Men are more than welcome to come along and support, but you get to meet basically other women who are doing what you do, or they've been there and done that with a young family, or, you know, there's like-minded people you can share ideas with and go, look, I'm really struggling. I've got this, you know, new child and I'm supposed to, you know, how does it work? How do I do the juggle? So there's people who've been there and done that. You can pick their brains. I think there's a beautiful network with the women who are in financial services as well. Some of my closest friends are, you know, women in financial services. So, you know, it's an interesting journey that we've all been on, like you said, in a very male dominated profession. I've got to stop saying industry. It's a profession now. So the other thing I think is that there's less and less advisors since the Royal Commission. You know, we've lost nearly 10,000 financial advisors. So the opportunities that are ahead for women who want to enter financial services, especially younger people, to come in, get their degree and start, you know, whether you start working for someone to start with, do your professional year, stay in that business and learn, then to go out on your own. If that's something that's of interest, you may be more than happy to stay, you know, in a really supportive firm. But there's so many opportunities now for people to come into financial services because of the amount, and there will be more exiting. You know, we've had 27,000, we're down to 17,000 as we speak. That will go even further, you know, as the education requirements come in and older advisors who just refuse or don't want to go to university because, you know, they have been doing it and doing it well for 30 or 40 years. Are told, you know, you need a degree to do what you've always done. So there will be more exiting, but there's, you know, brilliant opportunities for women to come into a space that is going to be underserved.
Yeah, and I love the support. There's that identified support for women to actually potentially run their own business and create their own life, whatever that looks like. So that's really good to hear. But I just thought I can't leave without, I suppose, getting some guidance on, again, we both do in that financial abuse space. And I mean, the stats that I've read is that 16% of women have or will go through financial abuse, which is almost 1 in 5, which is unacceptable. Absolutely. And it does affect men as well. The stats also said 8% of men. So I think that's very hidden.
Absolutely. And I've reached out to so many men to share their stories, and it's very difficult. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment involved. So look, if anyone's listening who'd love to share, you know, I'd love to, you know, shine the spotlight on it, full stop. I also love that, you know, coercive control is being investigated by governments now to become a crime. Yes. Which is fantastic news. So
yeah. And what's sort of some guidance that we could give someone before they get into that space around being that financial independent and maybe looking at some of the flags, the red flags, so to speak?
Yeah, I think one of the best things, if you're starting out in your career and becoming quite independent with your money, and, you know, you do fall in love with Mr. Wonderful or Miss Wonderful, whoever your preference is, maintaining some form of independence is really important. And having goals as a couple is also really important. I think open communication right from the very beginning, understanding people's views about money. It's not something we really talk about. Like, what did your parents say when you grew up about money? But never, ever completely surrendering your independence. So maintain a personal bank account, have the other partner maintain a personal bank account and contribute to what you want to achieve together, so that if you ever need a plan B, and I hope you don't, you're never reliant on another person completely for your living. Pardon me. Talking too much. So I think that maintaining some form of independence and never be completely reliant on another person is super important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's great advice to keep that independence and have that learning about money. So really go outside and try and learn, you know, and have that confidence with money.
Yeah, I think the self-education piece is really important. I'm a massive fan of never stop learning or I'll, you know, shrivel up and die. So constant education. I mean, today we've got overwhelming, you know, abundance of information, too much, you know, at our fingertips that, you know, everybody wants to share their 2 cents worth. So there's so much out there and available that we can learn around increasing our own financial literacy. And if you do have someone who is in your life and you're starting to think, I'm just getting a dodgy feeling about this. I've noticed, she said she has to show him her receipts, or she's not allowed to buy that new pair of shoes anymore, or why can't she come out for cocktails on a Friday night, or whatever those things are that inside of you that you're noticing. I think it's a very brave thing to turn around to a friend and say, look, I was really uncomfortable when I heard that the other day. Make it about you, not them. And I just wanted to open the channel. Is everything okay with you? I'm here if you need me. Opening that door to be able to talk about it. I mean, the other person may be sitting there going, oh, maybe in their gut they're thinking it's not right, but you push it aside. I love them. It's okay. They've got my best interests at heart. And you go so far down that road, and it's like the old story of the frog in the pot. By the time you realize you're boiling, you cannot jump out anymore because you've let it go and you've let it go and you've let it go, instead of going, you know what, I am really uncomfortable with, having to do what I've been asked to do, or the micromanaging of the finances, or wanting access to view everything, whatever that may be. And being able to have someone trusted you can speak to about it. You never want to be, in those situations where you need to flee for your life in a domestic violence situation and don't have 2 cents to rub together to do it.
And that is so valuable. And I think what I took away from that is we can observe a change in maybe our friends, but we don't say anything because we think it's none of our business.
I remember that. Yeah, I think it was the Alison Baden Clay murder in Queensland that happened a few years ago, where the husband murdered his wife and they had 3 daughters, and the parents ended up running a campaign afterwards with the hashtag Say Something.
Yes.
They said these were all the signs we witnessed over the years. Alison's shoes were scuffed and worn out. We saw him taking credit cards off her, and we thought that's a marital issue. It's none of our business. And she was murdered. So I mean, you'd never forgive yourself for not saying something. If your friend's in a similar situation, and chances are they haven't told you. So having someone that they know they can trust and lean on is really important.
Yeah, and that's such a strong message, and I think that's a great way to finish it. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, not only in the financial planning industry, financial abuse. I think the podcast around Financial Secrets Revealed is important. It's allowing people to tell their truths and tell what's going on in a safe environment. So you're doing some amazing work there, and I really appreciate the changes you're doing in that sort of money space. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Really lovely coming on the show. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.